I bet there's a clogged drain.
I know, Gunner.